Welcome to Green Dot Daily, Action Network's daily sports betting show. I'm your host, Maria Marino, coming to you every weekday at 3 Eastern or on demand on the Action Network YouTube and the Action app. It's day 2 of the Masters. We'll help you figure out which golfers to bet on and which to fade moving forward. We'll also cut through the noise on the NFL draft and share some advice just on how to approach it from a betting perspective. We've got NASCAR picks coming up as well, but we start in the NBA with the regular season almost over, and welcome in Action Network senior writer Matt Moore. Matt, games are just super hard to predict this time of year because some teams are out of it, some teams are resting key players, but if you have motivation to win, that's everything. So can you give just a brief rundown of which teams are in those motivational spots starting in the Wild West?
Yeah, okay. So the biggest mess in the Western Conference is in seeds 5 through honestly 9. You've got the Warriors, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Pelicans, and the Timberwolves all vying for various playoff spots. Because of tiebreaker implications and how close these standings are, there are every single number of permutations that we could wind up with. As far as like these next couple of games, the biggest motivational spots are going to be the Warriors. The Warriors need to win in order to avoid falling into the play-in spot. They lose tiebreakers to the Pelicans. They lose tiebreakers to the Lakers. They lose tiebreakers to the Clippers. That's bad. So the Warriors tonight versus the Kings. Kings resting everybody. Warriors are going to be very motivated. The Lakers, obviously, they're on the same kind of path, trying to avoid getting in the play-in tournament. They still have a good chance. If one or the other of the Lakers and Clippers were to lose one, they would have a chance for getting into one of the final 2 playoff spots in the Western Conference and avoiding the play-in. They're motivated, playing a Suns team, resting everybody tonight. We thought the Mavericks were going to be motivated, still alive for a playoff spot. Thunder are only 1 game up. Thunder have tiebreaker, but if the Thunder go 0-2, very doable. Mavs could get in, and the Mavericks are resting half their players. I have no way to explain this. There's no way to explain what the Mavericks are doing. They're literally just giving up. It might be for pick purposes because they do send their pick depending on where it lands, but they're already so far in. This is a baffling decision, especially considering everybody but Luka Doncic is going to play. So I guess take the Luka over on props. That's all I really got for you there. And finally, the New Orleans Pelicans need to go 2-0. If the Pelicans go 2-0 and the Warriors or Clippers lose 1, the Pelicans have a great shot based off of tiebreakers of getting into the 6th seed and finishing above the play-in fold.
Okay, so sounds like it's a positive outlook for the Warriors, the Lakers, Pelicans, Mavericks. Who knows what's going on with them? It has been a baffling second half of the season for them, but yet somehow they could miraculously still make it in, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do. Now, in the East, we at least know the 10 teams that are headed to the postseason, but some spots may still be shuffling. So which Eastern Conference teams are really playing for something?
All right, so we're locked into 6 is up for grabs, 7's up for grabs, 8's up for grabs, 9's up for grabs. Bulls are locked in 10th. They're done for the season. They're going to be resting guys, so be aware of that. They play the Mavericks tonight. That should be a fun game for everyone involved. The Miami Heat need to win, and the Brooklyn Nets need to lose out. If the Heat win out and the Nets lose out, the Heat snag the 6th seed. They get the Sixers, and they avoid the play-in tournament. Very hilarious that the Sixers played starters last night in an effort to beat the Heat to make sure that they would not face Miami, who knocked them out last year, only for the Heat to absolutely house them by 20. That was a really funny outcome. Nets are motivated. Nets magic number is 1. They win or a Heat loss, and the Nets are locked in. That's going to impact things tonight in that game based off of the fact that if the Heat game starts earlier, if the Heat are losing, the Nets won't have motivation to finish that game, and they could pull starters. It's a reason we talked about the Magic on our Buckets pod, even with the Magic also resting guys. Finally, the Toronto Raptors. Raptors win, and they could stay alive for a spot for the 8th spot. That means 2 different shots at a play-in. That's double elimination in the play-in tournament and a home game in the second game if you lose the first. That's significant. If the Hawks win, the Hawks lock into the 8th seed, and the Raptors will be 9. So the Raptors and Hawks both have motivation tonight as well.
Yeah, I'm interested in that net situation too, because you mentioned, things could change by halftime, but they definitely want to control their destiny as much as they can and try to avoid that play-in, stay in that 6th spot. Because the playoff picture in the NBA is complicated, and especially this season, I mean, tell me if you agree. It just seems like it's been crazier this season than in seasons past. But how can you simplify this whole landscape for bettors?
Bet the Eastern Conference. That's the secret here, is you can get the East at a minus number. So what this kind of looks like, the Nuggets are the number one seed in the Western Conference, but they're going to finish with fewer than 54 wins. There have only been 4 teams in 43 years to win the finals with 54 or fewer wins. 2 of those teams had already previously won a championship. This kind of shows you that the West is just weaker than it typically is. It's a very weak conference this year. It's super competitive. Anybody can make a run, but the reason anybody can make a run is there aren't these dominant teams at the top. Like, we can simplify that down to the Suns if you want, but injuries make that very questionable. But in the Eastern Conference, you got the Celtics, you got the Bucks, you got the Sixers. All those teams are definably better than the Western Conference. I like some of the matchups depending on who it's going to be in the finals, but the overall strength lies in the East. So if you bet those teams, and if you don't want to bet the East flat on one of those props, what you can do is just pick out whichever one you think is the best. Currently, I think the Celtics have the best path to the NBA Finals. The Sixers have struggled with them historically. They match up really well with Milwaukee. They're a better team than last year. I think they lose last year if Chris Middleton plays, but I do think that this version of the team is better. The Celtics are actually a little bit underrated. They have to be, because they won't have home court advantage in the conference finals versus the Bucks. That's reflected in the market. There's a piece up in the Action Network app about the road to the finals for the Boston Celtics. I suggest you check that out and take a look at Celtics futures, because to me, there's a big advantage to be found with how good Boston has been relative to everyone else.
Yeah, run, don't walk to check that out, because I mean, look, if Matt Moore likes it, then that should be good enough. But also, I did think it was a cool point you made about the East, not only being stronger, but the fact that you have some teams that can separate. That makes it a little easier to predict, as opposed to the West, where it just seems like a bit of a crapshoot. But Matt Moore, thanks. We'll see you again Monday on Green Dot Daily to sort through, once we know what all these playoff spots end up being.
Talk to you then.
All right, now to the Masters. And a big factor this weekend will be the weather. We know you've heard about it. Meteorologist Kevin Roth has outlined the forecast for us. It shows rainy and windy conditions expected this afternoon, with the worst weather coming throughout tomorrow. So now let's welcome in Action Network senior writer Collin Wilson live to help us sort through the field at the Masters. And based on what you've seen so far and taking into account the weather, who are some names that you're buying into this weekend?
Yeah, that weather is right there on the doorstep. You see the clouds starting to come over Augusta right now. So things are going to get kind of wild, which is interesting because right now, Brooks Koepka, a live golfer, is at the top, and an amateur is the closest one to it. If you have that on your bingo card, go buy a lottery ticket for tonight. There are 3 names that I've been buying this morning by watching just strokes gained putting alone, because there's just been some disastrous play from some of the big names up at the board. The first one I'm going to buy is Jon Rahm. Currently, he's just got out of the trees. He's sitting at 3-1. He's currently 3rd in strokes gained tee to green. His ball striking has been at championship level. It's just that his putting has not been there at any point in the tournament. Any kind of correction is going to get him up to challenge Brooks in the next 2 rounds. After that, Gary Woodland, 250-1. That's the live number on a guy that's 8 strokes behind the leader, Brooks Koepka, with 2 rounds to go. He's currently 11th in strokes gained total. He's got neutral putting right now, so if that picks up, Gary Woodland is someone to look at. But more importantly, with this rain coming in, Gary Woodland has the game to hit low-level woods and drivers, just stingers that go down. They don't get very high and let the wind control it. He's a great player in U.S. Open-type weather conditions, so look for Gary Woodland. And then finally, Scottie Scheffler. You have to talk about it. The defending Masters champion. His number was 7-1 coming into this. He is putting up historical bad putting numbers. We're talking almost -4 strokes gained on the tournament, which he's almost doubled anybody else. Like Kevin Na withdrew after a few holes, and he's almost doubled everybody else in negative strokes gained putting. If that gets any kind of correction whatsoever, I know he finished -1. He's 11 shots off the lead right now, but his name, Scottie Scheffler, Jordan Spieth, Jon Rahm, these are guys that can string together 6 birdies in a row and cut into that lead. So Scottie Scheffler is 85-1 right now. I'll shove over a little Chipotle meal money over in that name.
Yeah, and why not with such great value on those players that you just highlighted. But I do have to cut in with a bit of breaking news. The Masters was just suspended as of just a few minutes ago due to the inclement weather. So we will have to see what the plan is moving forward. So I want your reaction to that, but I know on the flip side, you have some thoughts on, players to stay away from, just players that you're selling on the board as the second round winds down, but now taking into account that play is suspended for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I'm watching Shane Lowry pick up his ball and walk off here. So, breaking news that thunderstorm that was on the doorstep is now there. 3 players that I'm avoiding in live betting because it looks like we're going to get a period of no activity. This is supposed to be a 1-hour thunderstorm, and they should be back out to finish this round. But 3 players I'm avoiding is starting off with Brooks Koepka. Right now, he's plus 110 on the live board. He's plus 2 strokes gained putting. That could cool off. He is mashing par 5s, though. If to win this tournament, you got to win par 5s. But his numbers just, no one's laying plus 110 with 2 days to go. So avoid Brooks Koepka. He can get caught. Victor Hovland, all these heroic saves he had on the back 9 yesterday, the up and down saves that he had, they're not there today. You can see he's already dropped a stroke. It's somebody I came on Green Dot Daily on Wednesday and said, I'm taking him straight up at 40-1, but I would not touch him in the live market right now. And finally, everyone's going to be pleased, I guess, to see Phil Mickelson in the top 20, a familiar name. Lots of fun to watch, even though the coverage hasn't even flashed or panned to him whatsoever. Right now, he is leading all players on the board in strokes gained putting. That putter has saved him, and it's what's got him in the top 20 right now. But he is a no-go. He is a red light when it comes to a live betting.
Good to know. And just to clarify, we are waiting to see if play will resume a bit later. To your point, these T-storms might only last for a temporary period. So play not suspended for the rest of the day yet. But I know, Collin Wilson, you'll be on your toes. Thanks so much for all the insight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Green Dot Daily is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,000 paid back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Now to NFL. We're less than 3 weeks out from the draft, and here's a look at some of the odds movement we've seen. In the last month, CJ Stroud surpassed Bryce Young as the favorite to be picked first overall, but that was before the rumor mill that took place Thursday. As we bring in NFL analyst Like Swain, aka Vegas Refund, on Twitter. Nice to meet you, Luke. And it seems like the report Thursday about the Panthers' interest in Bryce Young was a false alarm. So how has that affected the landscape, and who would be your bet to go first overall?
Yeah, so it is one of the more sensitive markets that exists for a lot of reasons, but Bryce Young was the favorite, I want to say, going into quote-unquote draft season, which you had multiple months of NFL bettors betting into Bryce Young from the start of college football up until February. And then that trade happened with the Bears, and there was a lot of context behind the Panthers loving Stroud, which the odds flipped at that point. And then as we've progressed, as of yesterday, I guess you could say, quote to the maximum, Dov Kleiman retweeted a clip from Chris Mortensen, who stated that Bryce Young was going number 1, which that clip was actually from Monday. So he was only about 2 or 3 days late. And as that went out, the market reacted and a bunch of money came in on Bryce Young, and the odds completely evened out, not to the point where Bryce ever became the favorite, but then it came and leveled out where Stroud ticked back up to the favorite again. And then a couple other outlets kind of piggybacked off of that Dov Kleiman tweet. So more eyes saw it, more money bet Bryce. And then, of course, this morning it came out that that clip that was being referenced on Chris Mortensen was actually just a mock draft. And how he phrased it, I guess, was in the context of thinking he was reporting the pick, but he really wasn't. So it was the definition of fake news in probably the most highly sensitive market that exists. I have believed Stroud was going to be the number 1 pick. I didn't make any moves off of that news, thankfully. But I am wavering a little bit on Bryce Young, but I still believe that it is Stroud. At the current odds, I wouldn't be making any bets on the number 1 market.
Well, interesting. And that's good to know. You referenced the fact that this is a sensitive market, and clearly this shows why, because the odds changed so much just based on a report that was out there that, to your point, was fake news. So Can you just explain a little bit more why this is such a sensitive market?
Yeah, so betting into whether it's the NFL draft, the NBA draft, it is a totally different beast than anything else because it's very informational based. And I think like the cliche of Vegas knowing everything, like they don't. And I think the perception is that people think that books have like insider information on what's going to happen in this draft, which they just don't. And in a market that is info based, where all you have to figure out is what a general manager is going to be doing and who he's taking, compared to a sports game where a million different things could happen, whether it's an injury, etc. Really, you just have to figure out the answers to the test and what that decision is. And that card just has to be taken from the podium by Roger Goodell. So there's a lot less volatility, and it is very informational based that if you have it and the book doesn't, it's going to react because they're really just in the dark just as much as everyone else.
Fair enough. Well, we've seen some odds released on over-unders, like for when a player will be drafted, as well as the position a team will draft first. Do you have any early leans or anything in particular you would stay away from?
So relative to other years, the books are definitely getting a lot better at setting these over-unders. In past years, they were just really bad lines. And up so far, which at this point, we're 3 weeks out, compared to years past, we would have had a lot more over-unders. They are starting to come out more and more every day. And books are really, how they're moving them is a lot different compared to other years. Instead of moving the line, they're moving the juice, where a lot of the over-unders at this point are minus 200 or higher. And unless you know the answer, unless you have like intel, I guess you could say, I wouldn't be laying these numbers on any of them. And yeah, I wish I had a bet for this show, but there will be bets, and that more and more are coming on every day. Like Will Levis popped up, Devin Witherspoon popped up right before this show, 7.5, 8.5, which if I was setting the lines, that's exactly where I would have set them. But yeah, we will. Next time I'm on, I'll have some bets. But currently, they're all, like all of the lines. So I guess the best advice for the over-unders is there are no great bets currently because the books are setting them very well. I still think they suck at this, but so far, so good.
Well, look, you don't want to force anything, and to know what not to bet is just as important as knowing what to bet. So, Luke Swain, we appreciate you just giving us the lay of the land here as we get closer and closer to the draft. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
We're not done yet on the show. How about some NASCAR? This Sunday is the third ever dirt race at Bristol Motor Speedway in Tennessee, and here are the odds leaders to win the event. Kyle Larson checks in at plus 500, followed by Tyler Reddick and Christopher Bell, tied at plus 600. So let's say hello to Action Network predictive analyst Nick Giffen. Nick, now that we squeezed as much March Madness out of you as we possibly could, we're free to talk some NASCAR. So what are some bets you like for this weekend?
Yeah, we move on from the March Madness to the April Mayhem on the dirt at Bristol. My first bet is going to be Martin Truex Jr. to finish as the top Toyota. You can get that at plus 725 at BetMGM. One thing I really like, and I did talk about this on the Running Hot podcast, Martin Truex Jr. has the 9th best driver rating over the 2 Bristol Dirt races that we've run in the past. Now, 2021, the track was a little bit harder. It did drive a little bit more like an asphalt track, and he did better that year. This 2022, it definitely drove much more like a dirt track. He struggled, but that's because he got involved in some incidents early on. Well, in this third edition of the Bristol Dirt Race, we're no longer going to have what we call live pit stops, where pit stops are part of the competition, right? You're trying to get into pit road, make your pit stop, and get off pit road as fast as possible. Instead, they're going to throw a red flag, stop the race, give everybody 3 minutes to complete their pit stop, and then they'll go back out in the same order they came in. So that should help Truex avoid those issues that he's had in each of the past couple of years in terms of his finish, because he's been very good. That in 2021, that year, he had 40 fastest laps, and he led 126 of the 253 laps, nearly half the race in that first Bristol Dirt Race. He also won the 2021 Bristol Dirt Truck Race. So very good record so far on Bristol Dirt. And there's only 6 Toyotas in the race. Obviously, you mentioned Tyler Reddick and Christopher Bell there as 2 of the race favorites. That's why they're 2 of the Toyota favorites as well. But this is a chaotic event and things can happen. Christopher Bell crashed in 2021. Tyler Reddick crashed going for the win last year. If they have issues again, Toyota field with only 6 cars is wide open. That's why I like Truex at plus 725. For my second pick, I'm going to go over to the Ford camp and I'm going to take Chris Buescher to finish inside the top 10 at plus 180. Chris Buescher arguably had a top 10 car in both of the Bristol Dirt races. He was inside the top 10, 11, 12 in a lot of the predictive metrics that we use, like average running position, quality pass percentage, and driver rating. He also had the 4th best average, top 15 percentage between the 2 Bristol Dirt races. That's ahead of guys like Chris Bell, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Busch, some of the big stars of our sport. Chris Buescher was ahead of all of them in average top 15 running position there. We just needed him to finish in the top 10 to hit this bet. He did have some relatively unlucky finishes in those races for having a borderline top 10 car. He finished 14th and 15th, which is why these odds might have been pushed a little bit longer to that plus 180 side instead of closer to even money, right? If you're a top 10 car, borderline top 10 car, should be about a coin flip to finish in the top 10. And that's where my model has him at 49% to finish inside the top 10, which would be like plus 105. So if you're getting this at plus 180, I think that's great. I don't mind betting this all the way down to like plus 125 or so, just to leave us with a little bit of wiggle room there down to that 49% prediction.
Okay, so Chris Buescher, Martin Truex Jr., those are the picks you feel really good about. Anything else you have your eye on, even as a long shot?
Yeah, we're going to have a little fun here. So we're going to go way deep down here. And I understand if you don't want to make this bet because this is going to lose many times before it hits. But I'm going to take my guy, JJ Yeley, to finish as the top Ford driver at 350 to 1 odds at BetMGM, right? So 350 to 1, we're definitely not expecting it to hit. But if we look at the field of Ford drivers, there's only 3 of them that have a dirt background. Those 3 would be Chase Briscoe, Todd Gilliland, and JJ Yeley. And Todd Gilliland isn't in the greatest equipment. Now, of course, neither is JJ Yeley. That's why his odds are so long. But the rest of the Ford drivers, they don't come from a dirt background. Yeah, some of them had good results. For example, Joey Logano won the first Bristol Dirt Race. But again, a chaotic event, things can happen. JJ Yeley has that dirt background. Not only does he have a dirt background, he's good. He won the USAC Triple Crown all the way back in 2003. That is a legendary accomplishment in the dirt world. And even last year, I know that was 2003, but even last year, he spent 8% of the laps inside the top 15. So if he can replicate that, and then maybe a couple of the guys can have issues, there's certainly a chance here. So it's Bristol Dirt. It's a fun event. I highly recommend watching it just because it's going to be chaotic. It's going to be wild. So you may as well have some action on it. I'm throwing $5 on JJ Yeley to finish as the top Ford driver at 350 to 1. And I really actually do believe it is a plus EV bet. I have him closer to 50 to 1. Even if that's optimistic, 100 to 1, we're still getting value at 350 to 1.
Absolutely. And these chances to get dirty in NASCAR don't come around very often. So you might as well enjoy it. Nick Giffen, thanks so much for giving us the lowdown on this race.
Absolutely.
And for more NASCAR content from Nick, make sure you check out the Running Hot podcast, which drops every Thursday afternoon via Action Network. Remember, any picks you hear on our show, like the ones Nick just gave for NASCAR, you can track. Just follow Green Dot Daily in the Action app. Highly recommend. And remember, Green Dot Daily is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,000 paid back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's it for Green Dot Daily. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks for watching with me all week long. I'll see you again Monday at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube and the Action app. Have a great weekend.